Hey everybody, this is Dan, and today we're just going to do a quick video on how to maintain good low back health while you're working in the office. So any kind of low back issues, tightness or pain that you might be having, these techniques that I'm going to show you today are really good for mitigating those things. And once I show you these techniques, they're good to practice on your own. So at least take 10, 15, 20 minutes a day just to work on these, maybe while you're taking a break from work, just to work on these techniques. But the beautiful thing about them is that you can actually use them while you're sitting at your desk and working. Like, I'm constantly doing these things as I'm sitting and typing, as I'm sitting and doing research. I'm constantly shifting around and more or less unconsciously doing these techniques just to make sure that I'm moving, make sure that I'm keeping all that tissue nice and healthy, and that I'm mitigating any kind of postural distortions that I may have over the course of the day. While we're stressed, we tend to kind of go into these kind of postural habits that are really not good for us in the long run. So it's a good idea to just constantly be aware of them. The more that you move into these things and the more that you notice, the better you'll get at kind of mitigating them throughout the course of your day. So we're going to be using the exercise ball again, and first thing we're going to do is we're just going to take a seat and we're going to find our ischial tuberosity. So these are our sit bones, the bony knobs that kind of live right underneath your butt cheeks. And we're just going to find those with the pads of our fingers. As soon as you locate them on either side, you might have to shift around a little bit to find them. As soon as you locate them, remove your hands and then just kind of notice where those 2 points are in contact with the ball. Make a note in your mind. And then we're going to start by shifting back and forth. So we're going to be focusing on the relationship between our rib cage and our hips. And with our hips, we're going to be looking at where our hips are in space in 3 dimensions. So as far as tilting, that's tilting from side to side. Rotating, so think about the hips being like on a platter, like on a microwave platter. They're spinning around. Either your left hip is forward or your right hip is forward. And then also what we call flexion and extension. So each of your hip bones, they move independent of one another on either side. So flexion is when it kind of rotates down like that, and extension is when it rotates back. So we're going to be looking at those 3 dimensions of hip movement here. And first one we're looking at is tilt. So we're going to start by shifting back and forth, letting the ball slide underneath you. Feel it sliding over the sit bones there. And you're just going to let it slide back and forth underneath your hips. And you're going to let it go a little farther each time. And as you go all the way to your end range on one side, the side of your hip on that side should mostly be in contact with the ball. And you should feel less contact on that sit bone. And so once you get to that point, you'll notice that in order to keep from falling, you shift your whole body over the center of the ball in order to maintain your center of mass so that you don't fall. As you do this, I want you to add a little tilt in there in your torso. So when you're tilting, try to make that come from these tissues of your low back. If you're bending up here, then you're doing it incorrectly. You really want to focus on bending at the low back and feeling a stretch going all the way up from your hip into your low back. And if you're doing it really well, you should feel that stretch all the way down into your tailbone almost. So again, show you that again. We're going to slowly shift the ball to one side, let that hip roll underneath so that the side of the hip is in contact with the ball. You're tilting your torso toward that outside leg, trying to make that tilt come from way down here in the low back. And then as you do that, keeping your hip shifted underneath, you should feel a little bit of stretch down to the low back and even down into the sacrum and the tailbone. And then we're going to go to the opposite side. Same thing on the opposite side. Tuck that hip under, lean into this side, but tilt toward the outside leg. Try to have that action coming from the low back, and really try to feel that stretch happen down into the hip and then into the tailbone. And if you don't feel it go down that far, slow down a little bit. That means just slow down, back off a little bit, and then go more into that tilt. But again, try to have that come from as low down on your spine as possible. Okay, then we return to neutral. So that's the tilt. Next, we're going to deal with flexion and rotation of the hips. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to drop our left hip. And so we're just taking this knee. I'll move back a little bit so you can see this. We're taking this knee and we're just dropping it down toward the floor. So as I'm doing this, I'm almost rotating sideways. I'm dropping this knee, this hip is dropping, and I'm rotating my upper body toward the right side. I'm going to do it again. So as you do this, it's best to really be straddling the ball. So try not to come off the ball too much. Make sure that most of your weight is still on the ball so you can really focus on that stretch. And use your left foot on the ground to act like a little lever. Give you a little bit of leverage and lean into this hip. So you really want to bring this left hip forward, rotating your hips, and then also dropping it down toward the floor. And then come back. We're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Drop that right hip down. Let that right leg, that upper leg, rotate inside. Rotate that right hip forward, and then come back. And you should notice a difference between the two sides. If you are right-handed, if you're right side dominant, usually this is going to be a little harder to do on the non-dominant side or your left side. Usually your non-dominant side is less specialized for this kind of movement. So just pay attention to what you feel and notice the difference between either side. And that's pretty much it for today, guys. Hope that was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.